you, but since this brave new world dawned that we're all living in, certain things have taken on a tremendous importance to me that in the past I may have taken for granted or almost completely ignored. As I sit in my house with my cat, and some days having nothing to do, you know what the most important thing is? Waiting for the mail to arrive, you know? Of course, in today's situation, now that the election is passed and we don't have all that junk mail, we do have more junk mail that comes in the form of all these myriad appeals for charitable contributions, all of which are presumably very fine, but they're overwhelming. They just keep coming and coming and coming and coming. But mixed with all this junk mail too, we have some real treasures, don't we? Every once in a while, we actually get a letter. You know what a letter is? You just plumb the recesses of your mind as you take things of the past in. A letter is something that someone actually takes a pen in hand and they write on paper and they sign it and they put it in a thing called an envelope and they put a stamp on it and they put it in the mailbox. And then one day you get it and you can read it and you can reread it and it's wonderful. Well, we do still, I don't know whether you do, but I occasionally do get a personal letter. I sometimes get a card for some occasion with maybe a note inside. And it's something to really, really look forward to. I mean, sometimes it's the highlight of my week. I got mail. And of course, what you do in this situation is I have my den in the front of my house that looks onto the street where the communal mailbox is. And so I open my blinds and I look out there and I wait and I wait and I wait. And in today's world, you don't know when the mailman's gonna come. Mail person, I should say, because mostly it's a woman now. You know, in my situation, sometimes I get mail before noon, although that's a rarity. Generally speaking, it's around 1 o'clock. But there are days when it's 4 o'clock, and there are days when it's 7:30 at night, and it's dark out, and you can barely make the mail person out. You know? So you never know when the mail's going to come. Wait though you do. And sometimes the hours are long, other times they're not. On some occasions, I have developed my hearing so that I can tell that it's the mailman coming. You know, it's kind of like a dog or a cat knows about these things. There's just somehow, like the sound of the tires or something like that. You just know it's the mailman. And so you can expect it, and it arrives. Wonderful. Other times, I might just by chance walk into my den and look out, and there they are, they just drove up. You know, and I make a point of personal pride to be the first one in the neighborhood to get to that. Then there are times where, of course, you wait, and you wait, and you wait, and the thing that you're waiting for just doesn't seem to come. Or if it comes, it doesn't come maybe in the same way that you expected it to come. It's a common human experience, isn't it? All these things I've said. It's sort of a metaphor for life. isn't it? It's sort of a metaphor for our faith life also as we enter the season of Advent, which is a season of waiting. As much as we dislike waiting, as much as we want to make sure that those carols are sung early and throughout the season, as soon as we want those presents wrapped and hopefully given to us in advance, you have to wait the way things are. And you aren't in control of the situation, which is a tough thing for most of us to accept, that we're not in control. But that's why Advent is so real, why it really speaks to us. As we celebrate in Advent, really three things, if you think about it. Three ways that God comes to us. First of all, we celebrate that God did come to us in Jesus, in Bethlehem of Judea. The thing we sing about every year in the past, that he is coming to us today, perhaps in ways that we don't expect him to come, but that we sense his presence here, now, and also that he is yet to come, as we think about the second coming of Christ and what that might mean. So Advent tries to bundle all those three comings into one package and have us as a Christian people think about it. And I really always enjoy, especially the first lesson that we have today, that kind of sums up where a lot of us are so much in our lives. If we look at that lesson from what we scholars call the Trito-Isaiah, third Isaiah. In other words, the third one who was part of Isaiah's school that came up with this long book in the Old Testament that's a source of prophecy. He begins by kind of reflecting where we so often are. He says, "Oh, that you would tear open the heavens and come down so that the mountains would quake at your presence, to make your name known to your adversaries." This is the cry of the human spirit. God, we need you. Life is lousy. We're tired of subtlety. We want to really see a demonstration of your power and love so that the good guys win and the bad guys don't. So that those things that afflict us, the sufferings that we endure or that others we love endure, would end. And all would be wonderful. God, you talk about that all the time. I don't need it in the future. I need it now. Isn't that the way we are a lot of times in our lives? And then he says, when you did awesome deeds that we did not expect, you came down. Yeah, well, as we look at the past, we have to admit that we see that God did act, but he didn't always act when people said he had to act. In a lot of cases, he surprises us. I mean, think about all the ways that God surprised the people of Israel by choosing for them people to be his spokesman that nobody else would have thought he would have chosen. I mean, come on. You all know the stories about David, for example, Saul, some of the prophets. There's all kinds of examples of how God is a God of surprises, and while that may interest us, we're not too happy about it, are we? Again, we like to be in control, not God. And God had better act the way we want him to act, when we want him to act, or there's going to be to pay. Right? So often, that's the way we as human beings talk. And it's really, you say, why is the Bible so real? It's because it reflects who we are so often. It doesn't just pretty things up. It doesn't just talk about fairy tales and once happily ever after and all that kind of stuff. It lays it on the line. It pictures our relationship with God like it was with Jacob, where we wrestle with God. Don't we? If we're being honest, all of us have wrestled with God. We have said, God, you're not doing your job. I need you to do your job. And that's what Isaiah is doing. He's wrestling with God and life as it is, not as he would want it to be. And he thinks it's got to be. But it's interesting because as we continue reading Isaiah, and as we look at all of the Psalms, really, the psalmist may start up in that fashion, griping, but then they sort of turn on a dime, don't they? They change during the course of the psalm or the course of the prophecy. And you have verse 8. Yet, O Lord, you are our Father. We are the clay, and you are our potter. We are all the work of your hand. Do not be exceedingly angry, O Lord, and do not remember iniquity forever. Now consider, we are all your people. That's our pilgrimage. It's the necessary acceptance that God is God and we are not. That control of life, creation, history, all those grand subjects are beyond our competence, but not beyond his. And we cry out to him as our only source of hope in a world like this. And crying out to him, he hears our prayer. And he tells us the constant message. It will be all right. God doesn't tell us the details. We'd like to know the details. But he doesn't always do that. He rarely does that. Jesus himself in today's gospel lesson, in which he talks about the end of all things, himself says, I don't even know the hour, the time, the exact details. If that's the way Jesus is, we certainly are far below that, aren't we? And so it is that we are called by God once more to live by faith, not by sight. To believe in our heart of hearts that God loves us and he'll take care of us no matter what comes. And there can be some pretty rough days ahead. We all know that instinctively, just as we've experienced rough days in the past. But God says at all times, lo, I am with you always. And I'll be there for you yesterday, today, and tomorrow too. You don't need to know the details. You just need to know me. And I'll get you through. So many things we don't know in today's world. We don't know whether we're going to have church next Sunday, do we? Not really. We don't know whether this is going to be the last day of our life. None of us know that. But we know God's promises. And that can bring us joy. Because come what may, love never ends. I was hoping to be able to share with you the singing of My Lord, What a Morning. Do you folks know that hymn? I wasn't sure. I know some of you do. It's in the latest edition of the hymnal that this congregation does not have, but you've probably heard choirs sing it before. It's a what we used to call a Negro, a black spiritual. And it's an interesting song because when you understand the world out of which it came, it really speaks a lot to us, I think, any of us, whatever color our skin might be. For the African Americans that were brought here against their will, stuffed into ships for that big journey to lose everything that they had been known in the old country, brought to maybe the American South and enslaved for generations, working hard labor in the fields and having really no hope. It was a tough thing. And we know today by the things that we hear in the news that there are still tough things going on and people that are experiencing difficulties that maybe we haven't experienced. But one of the greatest gifts that their white masters gave the black people that were brought to this country in slavery, the greatest thing they gave them was the Christian religion, which enabled them to be people of peace and hope and to wait the unfolding of God's will, which embraced not only white people, but also black people and every shade in between. And so the African Americans came up with this spiritual, and its words are joyful. They don't pretty up what happens in life, but they have an underlying sense that things are going to be okay. It's God's love's going to reach out and bless them too. And so it says, my Lord, what a morning. My Lord, what a morning. Oh, my Lord, what a morning. When the stars begin to fall. Great things are happening, maybe scary things. But it's going to be good. In the morning, joy cometh in the morning. You will hear the trumpet sound to wake the nations underground, looking to my God's right hand when the stars begin to fall. You will hear the Christian shout to wake the nations underground, looking to my God's right hand when the stars begin to fall. May that be our constant prayer, that God go with us throughout this season of waiting that we call Advent, and throughout our lives. Because the postman does come, and he brings good news.